All right, code keepers. I'm sorry, fellow classmates. I hope you're ready. I hope you're ready. It's time to go to class.
Black diamond, 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 black diamond.
Grandpa Crump.
All right, Doc, we're all in our places with bright, shiny faces because of that Vaseline. And this is the way we start a new educational day. Affirmative action. It doesn't help Black folk? Professor, do tell.
All right, so I don't want the conclusion to be it doesn't help Black folks. Instead, I want our people to understand the range of concerns here. So I have posted this on social media. I also present this to my students over the years. We have examples from Derrick Bell's writings, from Harold Cruse's writings, from William Julius Wilson's writings, from Thomas Sowell, and the list goes on of many Black people in our communities, Black scholars, Black artists. Of course, we talk about the role of Black artists as intellectuals as the guide for developing our culture for political and economic development. So I don't want Black people to jump to the extreme of being like, oh, affirmative action hasn't helped us at all. We want to understand what Derrick Bell was saying. It was saying that we can appreciate that affirmative action has loosened the gate a bit over the past generations to make it more conducive to Black people being in workplaces and in schools. However, and I can share the writings in the links later. However, Black people in general, and I'm gonna say this for everything, we have to stop being so celebratory. And that's regarding politicians, political parties, and that's everyone. 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 I'm going to keep saying that. Everyone. Every politician, every political party, every decision maker in schools and workplaces, everyone who promises Black people something. And it can be a direct promise to us or an indirect, meaning they might not mention race, which is okay, because the whole idea is if you don't mention race, there will be a trickle-down effect to improve outcomes for everyone, right? Black people have to understand we cannot just appreciate promises. So that's what Derrick Bell and other people have addressed, Black people specifically have addressed. We can appreciate affirmative action opening the door for Black folks, putting our presence. However, we have to look at measured outcomes. That's why we do qualitative research and quantitative research. We don't just allow politicians, police departments, school decision makers, superintendents, including Black people who are in these roles. We don't allow them to look at numbers and say, look, this is happening because of this. No, we conduct research because numbers don't just say everything. Like we talk about that with crime. Just because a new mayor is in office or a police department has done something does not mean that's why crime has deducted. Crime can reduce for different reasons, okay? And my good friends are here. Thank you all so much for being here. So I see you all, shout out. And so we have to understand, why is this happening? You bring more Black people into schools, bring more Black people into workforces and workplaces. Now, is there going to be something that helps us? So those are the resource development issues there.
So why do we get so wrapped up in marching and jockeying for affirmative action? Why do you think that happens, Doc?
Why do I think it happens? It happens because for centuries, Black people in general have been told that we only exist as oppressed. We are an oppressed people. Our primary identity is oppressed. Therefore, we have accomplished nothing. We don't have a background of African knowledge and intellect. We don't have a background of creating anything, presenting anything. We're not a knowledgeable, intellectual people. I had someone who met me last week and they realized my brothers and I all have Swahili first and middle names. And they were like, oh, you must be good dancers. That's something, again, it's this notion that as Black folks, we're just here. We're good dancers. And we also have to understand the history of music also is a connection of intelligence as well, using art as a form of expression and knowledge spreading. Unfortunately, Black folks have taken that and instead of utilizing it for something to develop our people, as Harold Cruse, Marcus Garvey, W.B. Du Bois, Ida B. Wells, Anna Julie Cooper, and millions more Black folks around the world even have suggested, too many Black folks have taken that and stuck with it and allowed liberals, progressives, anti-fascists, conservatives, everyone who has these titles beside their name, I'm calling all of them out. They all rely on Black people not asking questions. That's why I tell Black folks, I say this all the time, do not be stuck in a category, a political, economic category. They'll tell Black people, if you have this certain viewpoint, that means you're a liberal, or that means you're a conservative, or that means you're a progressive. No, that means I'm a Black person who reads, who's involved in community work, who learns, who understands that we are beyond numbers. You can't just add us into health data instead of saying these are the outcomes. All right. So that's the case for affirmative action. Derrick Bell, which I encourage Black people to read his writings beyond talking about critical race theory, read his works. Read Harold Cruse's works, read Thomas Sowell, who talked about from a global perspective. Although Thomas Sowell, he's still alive, by the way, he's in his 90s. He talks about it from a class standpoint because he thinks he thinks race is overemphasized. I don't necessarily agree with everything Thomas Sowell says, but we can pick parts of it and understand how it connects. So Black people have to understand we can't just take something and then that's what we're going to latch on to. We have to know how to critique things. And that's something that's crucial to our development as a people, because every political party, every superintendent of schools, every person in decision-making capacities in every part of your life will bank on Black people not asking questions, not reading materials. And these are Black people who are in those decision-making capacities too. So they'll want Black people to be outraged. They'll expect Black people to march down streets or something like that. That's why when people talk about the book banning week or whatever, I tell Black people, why do we really care about that? Because I tell Black folks, if you're not reading anyway, why does book banning week matter? Has your family gone and bought some books now? The answer usually is no. Like when I give free books to Black folks, including online PDFs of articles and books, most Black folks will tell me they don't want to read. So why you care about books being banned, right? So this whole banned books thing, that's an example of, it's an illustration, unfortunately, of affirmative action. Because again, we're represented, but what do we expect from the outcomes? Surely we don't expect them to be the ones who determine our knowledge. Like, yes, we get knowledge from schools and places, but that can't be the only source. Like, they're not the ones that tell us what to do, right? So the list goes on. Mm-hmm.
Professor, I'm trying to process what you just stated. You stated that the banning or the activity around banning of books and people complaining about it and jockeying against it is connected with affirmative action. I didn't make that connection. Can you go over that section again for me, Doc?
Yeah. So when we talk about affirmative action, a lot of people understand that that's one of the critiques of affirmative action is it's like a quota. You're just adding people in there. And like I'll explain, affirmative action has mostly benefited non-Blacks. The same thing as when we talk about DEI, it's benefited everyone else. And so therefore, Black people have to say, okay, what is going to be gained? What is the benefit of these programs here? Beyond just the title, beyond just saying affirmative action is good for us. What are the outcomes of this? Okay. So the same thing when we're talking about banned books, these are all titles, because now if you're outraged over banned books, are you going to get the books and read them so that you can bring knowledge into the classroom? If you're not reading more, why are you talking about banned books in the first place? These are all just titles. I always tell adults, this nonsense, this time wasting that you're doing it because you've seen it all over news stations. Those of us who were born before news stations became 24/7, those of us born before the internet existed like this, those of us born before social media, knows that now people are surrounded by things that are supposed to be important. But it's not really important because it's not really changing anything. People are not reading more. They might be reading more online. They might be allowing these different news stations, and that's all of them on every side of these political stances, telling them what's the hot topic at any given moment. But Black folks and everyone else in the general population are not increasing the knowledge. We can talk about that as it pertains to banned books, and you can talk about that as it pertains to affirmative action, because one critique of affirmative action is when you're adding people, you're not changing the curriculum, you're not changing the version of history, you're not changing how mathematics is taught, you're not changing the arts, the literatures. If you're talking about standardized tests, then you say, okay, let's get rid of standardized tests. Okay, but are you getting rid of it because you don't know how to increase learning? Because standardized testing has always been horrible in terms of who creates them, right? So are you going to change how they're created, or are you just going to say that the schools just don't care enough to change the learning space that's being created? In other words, throw us in there, and that also happens to newly immigrated populations. Throw people in there, we've got the numbers, but the knowledge is not being changed. Are there any questions about anything I just said?
I think you helped me understand what you were sharing. Now when we do, our Googles, it says that affirmative action has benefited many groups. Is there anything wrong with this statement? Because some people will just do this simple research and stop.
Yeah, well, that's basic understanding. First of all, like I did an introduction. Okay, let me go back like old hip hop and reintroduce myself. I'm Dr. Kimya Dennis. I started off with an explanation of Derrick Bell, of William Julius Wilson, Harold Cruse. Okay, so I want people to read those writings and not just do a Google search. I have those writings in shared Google Drive files on my social media. Brother Seiko Varner could also share those readings. I was interviewed last year to talk about the overemphasis of the internet and social media. I really want grown folks to get beyond just a quick answer and to learn beyond that. And I hate AI with a passion. I really hate AI. Like, as you saw, the Google result at the top was an AI overview. And I'm gonna tell this to you all who are in college classes, undergrad and grad student. Now we have AI detection. So you can't use a computer to create knowledge and think that we won't catch you now, okay? All right, just giving a little shout out on that one. So, all right, so we already know Derrick Bell, Harold Cruse, all these people have explained it for generations now that affirmative action mostly benefits non-Blacks, the same as disability resources, DEI, mostly benefits non-Blacks. The people who benefit from these programs the most are actually white women. That's the case as always. Okay? So yes, I really hope that people did not need AI to tell them that, though, because we literally have more than 50 years almost of writings about that, because you can talk about the history of white women's suffrage, white women's liberation, and how that led to white women being considered the model of gender justice, sexuality justice, components of racial justice when you look at ethnicity and nation of origin variance among white women. And so whenever people talk about equity, diversity, inclusion, and affirmative action, you'll oftentimes see non-Blacks represented, especially white women. But either way, people need to say, what are the results if people want to push affirmative action programs? So you'll see news stories published this week where schools are being sued because of affirmative action. Sometimes the people suing the schools are people who are Asian, and that's a cultural component, also a component of immigration as well. And so some of those are distractions, but we just want to understand that affirmative action will always be in the news. So I want Black people, don't just support affirmative action just because the name sounded like it was something for our people. Affirmative action has done something in terms of numerical representation. Now Black folks have to say, honestly, what is really coming from this? Because I'm gonna tell you something, as an academician, I'm gonna tell y'all something. There are universities that have been so proud of themselves because they, and by the way, I don't use the phrase people of color, persons of color. I don't use acronyms that have of color in it. I consider that insulting to Black folks. We were the first people who were called colored, so you're not gonna have anything colored in it, by the way. Although the NAACP eventually started using color to include everyone who is not white, I'm not going to do that. So I'm just going to go ahead and say that. But I do want people to know that a lot of schools made themselves so proud over the past generation because they brought in more quote unquote Black and brown students. They were so proud of themselves. Then the schools started struggling financially because they realized that the quote unquote Black and brown students were even less likely to come from wealth, less likely to have families that are middle class to upper class, and less likely, if they graduate, to give back money to the school. And to even be struggling financial aid so much that you won't have money to give back to school for that as well. So you want to understand why HBCUs become successful, financially successful. HBCUs especially become successful in their graduate level. Graduate level become fewer Black students, especially Black students who are on the Western Hemisphere due to transatlantic slavery. And so HBCUs have learned to profit more from newly immigrated populations, especially in graduate programs. So these are all things to consider when understanding how you can feel like places are becoming more inclusive in terms of race, ethnicity, nations of origins, but a lot of schools are learning that inclusivity also has a negative impact on their financial status because they were not thinking about the class factor. And that's something, if you read William Julius Wilson's work, Thomas Sowell focuses on class 100%, but William Julius Wilson never reduces the emphasis of race. Race is still relevant, but William Julius Wilson, who's a Black man sociologist who's still alive in his 80s now, he does say class is important. Democratic Socialist Party, so he says class is important, but race is still a huge factor. Initially, William Julius Wilson in the 1980s and so forth was a proponent of race-neutral policies in terms of affirmative action and other policies because he demanded that politicians and the government overall make these changes to advance poor working class people. And then, of course, which I always tell people, your viewpoints are going to change throughout your life. Anyone who tells you that their perspectives is the same over 50, 60 years, even 10 years, 5 years, they ain't done nothing. I'm gonna tell you that right now. Okay. So if you're really involved in community work, doing readings, all these type of things, your viewpoints are going to change. So William Julius Wilson's an example of that. Therefore, his views on affirmative action did change if you read his writings over the years. That class is still a huge emphasis, but race is still a factor. Therefore, for affirmative action, you can't say that we're going to have a race neutral affirmative action, because you'll find which groups will be excluded, particularly Black folks will be excluded if you want a race neutral affirmative action.
All right, class, we've been talking about affirmative action, factual appreciation, and factual critiques with the good doctor. So, hey, we're going to take a quick commercial break. Let's do it.
Say that they are living paycheck to paycheck.
You will be wealthier.
My wife and I were flipping our first house.
When you shift the way you see things, then your life is going to shift.
Money is a tool for what you want. Money is not what you want. You don't want money.
So that goes to show that you don't have faith when you do not take your money and put it into those accounts to earn interest. When you're scared thinking that something is going to happen, God says, who are you trusting in? Because I'm the one that has created the money system.
Well, I then got offered $350 million for my company.
It says you owe about $538,000.
That the individual and the individual family unit is responsible for filling their own cups.
I went from being homeless and living on the street to owning properties in Baltimore.
And that's why I decided to start a bank.
This is something that Martin Luther King spoke about.
Stupid mistakes and failures. We continue stumbling forward
because the Black community, for the most part, had to go in rent.
That's right. That's the trailer for the documentary film Generational Flip. You can find that at generationalflip.com. That's generationalflip.com. And also, we want to highlight some of the great things that Doc has as well. So if you go to her link tree, and of course you can email Doc. I call it Doc. You need to call it Professor. You can email. No, they can call you Doc too. All right. So you can email Doc at the email address on the screen right there. And look, I want to show you some of the great things that Doc has. So if I go to, let's see, here we go. We go to the link tree. You have some of Doc's merchandise. She has merch. Yep. Some great information here from the Richmond. Let me see. The Rise of the Richmond Tenants. That sounds like a great article. Some information on Harold Cruse and Code Keepers. Fellow classmates, I was not up on Harold Cruse. I didn't know about Harold Cruse, and I'm becoming not a fan yet. Not a fan. Becoming intrigued by the writings of Harold Cruse. So we have some more Harold Cruse here. A lot of good research. So make sure you go to Doc's link tree. Oh man, Africans with epilepsy. That's something I haven't checked out yet. So I'm gonna have to check that one out too. But as you can see, there's a plethora of information here on Doc's link tree. So you can go to Doc's link tree, and I think you have that in the. Yeah, absolutely, Derrick. Great resources. Absolutely.
Derrick. Thank you, Derrick.
A suicide isn't a white people thing. That's
Yes.
an interesting conversation you have to check out. I know that doesn't necessarily tap in with our conversation tonight, our class tonight on affirmative action. But as you
Yep.
can see, there's a great amount of resources here on Doc's channel. So if you go to her link tree, and I know if you pop, let me pop it up here again so everybody can see what we have on your link tree.
And by the way, I've been
Give me
doing
just a
work
second.
regarding. I've been doing work regarding Black mental health and Black suicide now for 20 years. That includes my qualitative research, also my dissertation that I finished in 2010. I do presentations, training. I teach medical students. And unfortunately, I've lost friend and I've lost my nephew to suicide. So these are all important issues. And so I want Black people to understand nobody is immune, and you don't have to care about other people's opinion when you get help. And by the way, the Washington, D.C. radio station 95.5 that plays the best go-go, this evening they did a show about Black mental health and Black suicide. So I hope some people listen to that. It was hosted on 95.5. So you can go to their website and see if they posted an article about that.
Okay, well, good doctor. Now that you've said that there's some factual critiques on affirmative action, what do you advise us to do instead of fighting for affirmative action? What steps should we be taking?
I wouldn't say do not fight for affirmative action. I would say if you choose to be a proponent of affirmative action, be able to explain what it is. And this is one thing I also tell my students when doing assignments for me. Don't just use common words and common phrases. Like, I don't even like words like racism, sexism, all that stuff. Give me a sentence and explain what it is. Same thing for affirmative action. Can you put it into a full sentence or paragraph, explain the history of it, explain the meaning of it, and explain what it is? Because a lot of times we'll say, well, I don't want to be the token. Look here, every Black person who's been successful in some way and has gone in spaces, and sometimes even all Black spaces, has been the token. It's just a matter of for what. And I also have the book, Sam Greenlee's A Spook Who Sat by the Door, and also that full movie, I have that link as well. I want Black folks to understand, sometimes we complain about things, right? Not just common talking points. Thank you so much, Matt. And always give a shout out to Manuel for being here. But yeah, a lot of times we do talking points, we do popular words, popular phrases, and that's something that really gets me. And it's getting worse. Last year when I was interviewed for that social media mental health show with fellow Africans, I just explained, I said, I really want us to utilize technology, but not be stuck in it. Know what to do if all of a sudden we did not have access to the internet. Yes, Derrick, exactly. Be able to explain, because the internet, social media has made it. It's even worse when people started sending text messages with these little, if you don't know what someone's saying in a text message, I tell people, number one, those of us who are old enough to not use all that language, we need someone to explain what they're talking about. So the same thing with affirmative action. So know what it means. Don't just say that you're a proponent of affirmative action, and don't just support a politician or any decision maker who's a proponent of it unless they can specifically tell you what it is. So I'm going to use the elections as an example. When you go to every politician's website, and this can include politicians who are in different political parties that are not well known as well, their websites sometimes are very vague and abstract. Some are very wordy because they have a good marketing team. It doesn't mean that their legislation are going to go into action after they sign it, by the way. But you want to be able to read, what are they conveying? What are they explaining to you? Are they going to put it into action? Who's going to benefit from it? When they say they're going to benefit everyone, who's going to actually test that? And I tell that to Black folks included. Don't send me anything. Don't brag about meeting with policy analysts. Don't brag about meeting with legislators, politicians. Don't do photo ops and send it to me and think I'm going to celebrate you. I'm going to ask you, what are you all truly accomplishing? Beyond photos, beyond videos with music in the background, wanting Black folks to party like we're at a HBCU homecoming. What are you really doing? So the same thing is the case for affirmative action. What is really being done in terms of results? Because they always want to tell Black folks in particular that we can't complain. We just need to wait. And if you understand the old Negro tradition of having to wait in the dark and silence to see what's going to happen, and from a religious standpoint, it oftentimes happened in the Black church, just wait past the midnight hour to see what happens. Long gone are those days, okay? They better be gone at least. Culturally, there's some things we have to let go of as Black folks. We hold on to a whole lot of traditions, bringing in the midnight oil of New Year's Eve and stuff like that. Some things we have to ask ourselves productively. There's some traditions that we have out of respect, but are they putting us in pause for centuries to come? Because it's saying that we're just gonna wait for those decision makers. We're gonna wait for those Black folks who we voted for. Don't wait for anyone, Black folks. Anyone. It doesn't mean that you have to do all the research either. It means that you have to, and I'm telling you, when you question these legislators, politicians, and them, you got to do more than march down the street, because nobody cares that Black folks are angry. They truly don't care. I'm just gonna be sincere right now. Nobody cares. Black politicians and them don't care. Nobody cares. They know if you try to burn their building down, they'll get you. So nobody cares about that. Okay, the white liberals and progressives and them, they'll act like it's something profound. They'll be like, "That's right, Black people do it," because you are their token for them, right? Because they're going to get elected next time because they supported the Black folks marching down the streets. So instead, Black folks need to read more, to be more informed of what's happening, but also say, what are we going to actually require in terms of results? You're going to add us into these schools, but has the school curriculum changed? Like, are we doing better in math classes? The history we're taught. I tell Black folks, don't come to me and say you want us more in history books, but you only want to talk about slavery, Rosa Parks and them. Again, we come from knowledge. We have a background of thousands of years as Africans, and we brought some of that knowledge onto the Western Hemisphere, the transatlantic slavery. And we have mathematicians, scientists, social scientists, we have historians, musicians, we have preachers, we have all types of things in our people. Marcus Garvey was going to use the African Orthodox Church to bring our people together, including Black folks, Africans who are not even Christian. He was going to use religion to bring us all together on that, right? So we have a culture that's based in knowledge. So if you're going to be a proponent of affirmative action, you're going to have to do it more than just the quota. What is it going to be in terms of results? Don't just brag that you got a lot of Black students here. What does the curriculum look like? Don't brag that you got a chapter on slavery. Look here, again, those of us who are born in Richmond, VA, we know about Monument Avenue, darn it. We know about the Arthur Ashe statue still being there. Shout out to Arthur Ashe. But now, darn it, Black folks, we need more. And for centuries, Black scholars and Black artists have told us that we need more. And if now in 2024 and beyond, you still only yelling about banned books, talking about transatlantic slavery and wanting that to be taught in schools, if that's the only accomplishment, then that means absolutely nothing has been accomplished. And politicians, the hosts of these most popular news stations, all of these people need you to be stuck in that. And that includes the Black folks in these roles, because you being stuck in that gets more money for their best-selling book, gets more money for their TV show, gets more money for all the nonsense that they're doing for our people. And I don't even blame them anymore. Now I want Black folks to understand, what are we doing? So again, affirmative action, you could be a proponent of it, but it has to be results. It can't just be kicking the door, waving the 4-4. All we hear is Papa don't hit me no more. It has to be, once we're in the door, we're in the door, we here. What are we learning? What are we utilizing? What resources are we developing? And it has to be a result beyond that door being open.
All right, Doc, to bring this class to a close, I just would love to get your opinion on the Supreme Court's affirmative action ruling that happened a few months ago. Is that a blessing in disguise for us? Is that what are your thoughts on that decision?
Honestly, I'm really honestly apathetic on that decision, because it goes back to what I'm saying. What are the results of any of this in the first place? I just don't go up and down based on these court decisions. Like, that's what people want you to do. They want you to go up and down based on court decisions so that you can go up and down during election times as well. I want Black folks to understand, even if they decide that affirmative action cannot be in place in schools, we have to do more than protest outside of schools with posters that say affirmative action. If Supreme Court said affirmative action can be used in schools, we got to do more than host a party and say, yay, affirmative action is back. Black is back. Like Lakeem Shabazz said, Black is back, you know? Just like when the Monument Avenue was changed in Richmond, VA. You can't just party, like, what's next? You know? It has to be something more than that. So for me, you know, we can pay attention to what Supreme Court is doing. That's important. But these decision makers realize that grown folks are going to be up and down. And instead of moving towards actions, people are just going to be smiling or frowning with nothing really done from that. Which is, again, why I always explain to people, this is why Du Bois talked about talented 10th. This is why Marcus Garvey talked about a select group, particularly Black men, but we can expand it, of well-skilled Negroes, as they called it back then, who were going to spread those skills. And we have to understand that it has to be a collective of us. Harold Cruse talks about it from a cultural collective. The artists who are the intellectuals, the scholars, like, you know, I'm old school hip hop. So we look at that in terms of artistry, intellectuals, scholars. Who's going to be the collective of our people? We cannot rely on Black politicians and they have a role, but they cannot be the ones that you expect to do this. They're not the ones. They don't care that much. I'm going to tell y'all, no matter how much you allow them to break dance on the stage, do the fish plates and all that stuff, the Black politicians are not, that's not their capacity for Black folks like that. They can have a role, but the real change-making role, as Harold Cruse explains, and again, Black folks can find my entire presentation that Seiko Varner has shared. Yeah, got to have a plan to adopt both ways. You know, we have to integrate all of this. That's why I tell Black folks, don't be stuck in these political views that say, you got to believe that, you can't believe this, you got to do that. You're going to change throughout your life. You're going to believe that there's pros and cons on every side. People are going to tell you, don't say that because you got to choose one side. Look here, y'all. This is not the playground, okay? This is not the playground. And when you talk to Black folks, a lot of Black folks have viewpoints that they don't want to express a lot of people. So this is why I just say regarding affirmative action, the Supreme Court ruling, pay attention to that, but also just go directly to schools and say, okay, do y'all really go based on Supreme Court like that? The answer is most schools don't just go based on Supreme Court. They actually have like faculty who meet. We have faculty meetings, y'all. And faculty don't just go based on Supreme Court, by the way. So that's just something I want y'all to keep in mind. Like, Supreme Court is not this all-knowing Oz in front of everyone like they really want y'all to think. I mean, from a legal standpoint, sure. But you know how many things that happen that are not covered by Supreme Court and legislation, and it still happen? So Black folks better stop playing for that game.
We got to stop falling for the banana in the tailpipe. We've been watching Affirmative Action, Factual Appreciation and Factual Critiques, part of Professor Kimya's class.